I'm so excited to get to read this to you again. We did go over quite a bit for time last time, so instead of reading 2 chapters, I think I'm just going to read 1. And that will probably be a good length. I think there are, how many? There are 10 chapters, so last week was 1 and 2. This week will be 3. Again, my name is Fløren K, and I use they, them, their, or they, them, their pronouns. And we are going to get started with chapter 3 of Vidia and the Fairy Crown. Vidia was still in shock. She sat on the ground in the shadows of a mulberry bush and stared blankly ahead of her. She made no move to go until it seemed she was all alone. Then, with a heavy sigh, she stood up and turned around and saw Prilla sitting on a toadstool on the far side of the courtyard. Kind-hearted Prilla was one of the youngest Never Fairies. She was fairly new to Pixie Hollow. She hadn't known Vidia as long as the others had, but she had spent more time with Vidia than many of them. That was because Prilla, along with Vidia and Ranny, had been chosen by Mother Dove to go on a great quest to save Mother Dove's egg. It hadn't been easy. Ranny and Prilla had been forced to work with Vidia as a team for the good of Neverland, and in the end, they had succeeded. Along the way, Prilla felt she had gotten to know Vidia a little better. Prilla knew why fairies thought Vidia was difficult. Sometimes she was nasty and selfish. She had plucked Mother Dove in order to get fresh feathers so she could fly faster. Vidia admitted that. But Prilla had seen another side of Vidia too. Toward the end of the great quest, Vidia had had to make a choice. She could either share her extra powerful fairy dust to save Neverland, or keep it all for herself while the whole island lost its magic. Vidia had chosen to share. Maybe that was part of the reason Prilla had stayed behind when the emergency meeting ended. Unlike some of the other fairies, Prilla didn't believe that Vidia was all bad. Vidia, are you okay? Prilla asked. She flew over and landed at the fast-flying fairy's side. Vidia waved Prilla away. Oh, save your pity, sweetheart, she replied. She forced a smile, but it quickly faded. Do you think I'm worried? Well, think again. There's a reason I live on my own in the sour plum tree. It's because I find all of you very irritating. What do I care if I'm banished from Pixie Hollow? I can't stand the place. Prilla wasn't buying it. She could see the fear in Vidia's eyes. Oh, she knew that Vidia found Pixie Hollow annoying, but even Vidia wouldn't want to be forced to leave her home and live all alone away from her own kind forever. I'll help you, Vidia, Prilla offered. Tomorrow we'll start an investigation. We can ask around and see if we can find out what really happened to the crown. It's like a mystery that needs to be solved, don't you see? Prilla jumped into the air and turned a somersault. We'll be detectives. Vidia wrinkled her brow and looked sideways at Prilla. Why do you want to help me? She asked suspiciously. And how do you know I didn't take the crown? Prilla landed and shrugged. I don't know, she said. Maybe you did take it, but I don't think so. Vidia noticed that Prilla hadn't really answered her first question. And why do you want to help me, dearest? Vidia asked again. Prilla thought it over for a moment. When she first arrived in Pixie Hollow, she had trouble figuring out what her talent was. Talents are a big deal. Fairies spent lots of time with the other members of their talent. They ate meals together. Their best friends were usually members of their talent. Without knowing what her talent was, Prilla had had a hard time finding her place in Pixie Hollow. In the end, Prilla had learned that she was the first fairy with her particular talent. The first mainland visiting clapping talent fairy ever. There were no other members of her talent, but then other fairies had made her an honorary member of their talents. Over time, Prilla had settled into life in Pixie Hollow. She had made lots of new friends. She had found her place. But she still remembered those early days. Prilla looked Vidia in the eye. "I want to help you," she said, "because I remember what it's like to feel alone." Vidia returned Prilla's gaze. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Vidia never asked for help, and she wasn't used to getting any. She wasn't sure what to say. Vidia looked away. She cleared her throat. She looked up at the stars. She cleared her throat again. "Okay," was all she said at last. It was barely a whisper, but Prilla heard it, and she understood. And that is the end of chapter 3. Next week we'll continue on with chapter 4, and we'll see how the investigation goes for Prilla and Vidia, to see what happened to the fairy crown, to see if they can figure out what happened to it and why it's gone missing. So thank you again for coming to listen to the story. We'll continue it on next week, next Sunday evening at 8:30 Eastern Time, and I'll have it uploaded onto my YouTube as well. So that way you can come back and listen to it whenever you want. Bye. Good night.